Hi guys, today's video is on Norwegian Trommeslåtter, which is a folk drumming style from Norway that is based in Danish and Norwegian military drumming and is a rudimental style. So it uses double stroke rolls, drags, flams, the usual rudimental skills, but it pairs that with fiddle-like or zither-like folk instruments to play different tunes, and thus is not really any longer the military style, it's its own thing. And it's kind of interesting because those folk instruments, the Norwegian fiddles and zithers, they have sympathetic drone strings, kind of like a sitar, completely unrelated. But they have this sympathetic drone that happens underneath of all the music. And so the music for the drum is sort of based on also having a continuing drone. And by that we mean a continuous double stroke roll. So there are very few notes that are not part of a double stroke roll, and most of the singles are just accents within a larger rolling framework, which is really kind of a cool way to do it. If you're familiar with the three camps from the British and American duty, or if you've just played it as a solo, then you will know what this is like, because that is an underlying double stroke roll with a bunch of accents in it. So this is the same thing, but it's the Norwegian folk version of that concept. This is really based in military drumming, like I said, and you can tell that because a lot of the beatings that go to these folk tunes are based on the Norwegian and Danish reveille, which is in turn based on the French reveille, but there's a couple different weird things about it that we'll have to talk about, including the fact that there are two completely separate versions of how to play it with essentially the same notation. So pieces that are based off of the Norwegian reveille can be played either in the major style or the minor style, and the notation is actually the same, essentially, for both styles. So you have to know whether the piece is intended to be major or minor. And by major and minor we mean actually there's just a different amount of notes in each roll, and the rolls are sort of in the same structure, but they can be longer or shorter. So, for example, the major style has groups of what are essentially quintuplets, and it's played like this. And that style is very similar to the British roast beef or to the French and Swiss reveille. It makes a lot of sense if you know about those other types of things, but it's like a double drag tap and then essentially a 9-stroke roll in a little bit of a pattern. So when you talk about the minor version, the same notation, you just have to know when the piece is the minor version. You're actually going to get like a 5-stroke, or we'll call it a 6-stroke roll, and then a drag, and then an 11-stroke roll. So it's more of a 6-tuplet feel. It goes like this. So you can see there are more notes there, even though I'm telling you, and it seems absurd, that that is the same rhythm. It's not, obviously, but to a Trommeslåtter player, that is the same rhythm. So again, here's the major version. And here's the minor version. So that has exactly the same notation most of the time. Weird, but true. So you can see no matter which way I play it, the major or the minor version, it's a bunch of double strokes as the drone, and then a bunch of accents as single strokes sort of punctuating that drone. And basically, all the different types of beatings are like that, not just the reveille types of beatings, they just have a little bit of a different rhythm. In another video I played more of a wedding piece, and it has a different rhythm, but it's the same idea. Now, all that we know about this type of drumming really comes from one guy. His name is Johannes Sundvor, and he transcribed a whole bunch of master drummers from different parts of Norway in the late 1800s and early 1900s. I think his last manuscript is dated to about 1937-ish. And after that, the whole style kind of fell out of favor. It really went downhill until the 1980s, when some people sort of dug up his transcriptions and some recordings he'd made, which in the 30s, making a recording was a big undertaking. And they sort of pieced the style back together. So, to break up my talking a little bit, I will play you a piece, or I'll attempt to play you a piece That's just called double rexolinks, which was transcribed in 1918, I believe, and it is based on the major version of that reveille beating. It goes like this. Now, reading the notation is tough because they really don't notate these rolls. He just notates the accents, and you just have to know that there's a roll in between all the other notes. It's very strange to read, but if you have a good rudimental basis, it's not too bad. And this style is really unknown outside of Norway because all the books about it are in Norwegian. This guy Sundvor never published anything, so I've seen photocopies of his work, but there are a few books you can buy, and of course they're all in Norwegian. Everything's in Norwegian. So it's really hard to get at what it is from an outside perspective. So no wonder nobody really knows about it, right? It's difficult to access, and it's sort of cryptic, and the notation doesn't make sense, but it sounds really cool. So I'm going to attempt to play one more piece. This one's called Makesvirvel, which virvel has something to do with the word roll. It's sort of the same thing. I don't know exactly what this means, but this appears to be a brudlapsslåt type beating, which is a wedding type of beating. And it goes like this. Which that wasn't perfect, but that you get the idea. There's a couple of like inverted flam taps in there, which is interesting. And so there are flams. That's not everything's not a roll, but it's most of everything's a roll. This piece actually has a whole bunch of just single strokes in it too that are not really part of a roll. So it's kind of interesting. I don't have a date on it or a location or any information about it, but it's fun. So there you go. So although there's not really a good system of notation for this, and a lot of people don't use notation at all, there is a little bit of an organization to it. This guy named Rolf Seldal from Norway published a book, For den Lærer Traditionelle Trommeslåtter, or something like that. My Norwegian is probably terrible, but he gives every type of roll or phrase a syllable. And so I've talked to some people who said that they think that this is specific to this one guy, Seldal, but it's kind of interesting. So he like sings the beat. For example, 2 5-strokes plus an 11-stroke, like you would have in 3 camps. He would say do, do, do. So do, 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 do. And then that would help you to learn the pieces by being able to vocalize them before you played them. So that's one way of doing it. Another way of doing it is to just write the accents and then fill in the blanks with rolls that you just have to know they're there. We talked about that. But the weird thing about that is they very often don't write the rhythms that they actually mean, so there's a little bit of interpretation you have to do with that. Anyway, I obviously don't know everything about Norwegian Trommeslåtter, so we'll leave it there for today. But it's a little history, there's a few examples, and it's one of the things that's going to be in my book, once again, Rudimental Grand Tour on Mel Bay. So you're going to want to pick that up if you're at all interested in rudimental drumming outside of the United States, because most of it is at least going to be touched on in there. So that's it for today. Thanks for watching. See you guys next time.